Hey, Sens fans, welcome to this week's episode of the Senstennial Podcast. Thanks for tuning in for this show. Now, on this week's podcast, we want to talk about the Ottawa Senators results about a quarter way through the season. Actually more than that, because they played 24 games and currently they are sitting at 10, 12, and 2. So I know myself, I said I would reserve judgment on this team until about the 20 game mark. Well, baby, we're there. But before I get into it, I'm going to pass it off to my lovely co host to get us underway. And first, we got to start with the man, the myth, the legend. Look at that stash. Other Matt, how are you feeling? We're a quarter way in. Thoughts? Give me your thoughts. Let's start with the forward core. How are you feeling about the lads up front?
I'm not loving it. I'm not loving it. I'm gonna be
McDonald's,
honest.
they're not going to use you in their next commercial. Sorry, bro.
Definitely not. Definitely not. No, I mean, quite frankly, the only two players inspire actually, sorry, three players inspire a ton of confidence for me. Um, and get the obvious one out of the way. Tim Stutzle playing like he is a man possessed and is playing as the superstar that we have foretold. A lot of people liken his game to Leon Draisaitl because he's German. Nope. We have a baby Nathan MacKinnon on our hands. I'll put that out there. If people disagree, you're wrong. Nathan MacKinnon and Tim Stutzle have very similar games, and Tim Stutzle is that damn good, and I'm so excited to see him continue his trajectory upwards. The second one, Drake Batherson, point per game player, has looked really good. Um, and I think a lot of people still want more from him. And I don't necessarily think that's a fair expectation when you're probably just putting him up against Tim Stutzle. I mean, that's it. Like Drake Batherson has been very good. And if you got more from him, you might just be expecting a different player than who Drake Batherson is. And third, I'm going to say Adam Gaudette. He now has 12 goals on the season, which is absolutely insane. Finally getting a shot on the top line with Stutzle, and things seem to be working out in his favor, and it's easy to cheer for him. The rest, that's when it starts to get pretty dicey. I mean,
Well,
listen,
how about before we get to, because it feels like you're about to tear some people down. So
well,
how
I
about we
okay.
give Bennett the chance to jump in and maybe give who his three standouts are. I'm sure there'll be maybe some similarities, but Bennett, who are your top three? And then we'll go back to Matt and do like a what's letting us down.
Yeah, my top three is dependent on a quick Wikipedia search here. Does Tim Stutzle have a middle name? Can we get a ruling on this? I'm not seeing anything.
I think it's Timothy Him Stutzla.
My top three Sens forwards have been Timmy, Stutzle, and Tim Stutzle. He is quite literally the only Sens forward that hasn't had a bad game. He is the only Sens forward who has showed 100% effort in every game this season. He is the only Sens forward that has, consistently shown the ability to kind of like break games in the Senators' favor break games open in the Senators' favor this year. Um, and he is sort of like the beating heart of this team's offense. I think if you took him out of this team, we would be 32nd in the league, and I don't think it would be close. Um, Brady has been good most of the time. He's had a couple of serious stinkers as well, that cause people rightly or wrongly to start asking questions about him and his role with this team. Maybe we can bust that open later, but no one's having those conversations about Tim Stutzle, and that's because he has left no room for debate about whether or not he's this team's best player.
Yeah, and I believe I posted a stat the other day on Twitter where Stutzla at that point in the season, I think it was only 20 games into the season, He had 18 points through his first 20, or maybe it was 22 games, and he's continued that. He got points in each of the last 2 games, so now that's 20 of 24 games this season where he has recorded at least 1 point. So he has been, like you said, Bennett, extremely good. The best forward on this team, bar none. Extremely consistent effort every shift, every night. Um, you know, and with a guy like him in your lineup, you're gonna win games that you don't deserve to win. And when you lose games, he's still gonna look damn fine in the games you lose. So for me, when it comes to the on ice product and how the Ottawa Senators are playing, damn, is it hard to watch them sometimes, but Tim Stutzle keeps you on your toes and keeps it interesting. And I think that alone has been a positive for me this season. But I'll flip it back to Matt. Now you were about to get into some of the
I was
forwards.
about to cook.
You were, but I had to just hold up for a second, let Bennett get out there, and now it's back to you. And we talked about our little German fella. Now you can talk about basically everyone else who you're not happy with.
There's quite a few of them. Listen, I think we can look at the fourth line and just expect it's not supposed to be a chance generating machine. And I feel as though you should always just have a revolving door on that fourth line. Nobody's job is safe unless you play your way off of the fourth line like Adam Gaudette did. But our bottom six is in one of the most historic slumps I've seen for the Ottawa Senators. Shane Pinto has 4 points. David Perron has 0 points. Michael Amadio has 5 points. And I'm just rattling these off because they're numbers in my head. Even
Nick
if it
Cousins
was
has three times as many penalty minutes as he does points.
Yeah, that's to be expected from Nick Cousins of all, but like that's a perfect example of a guy who should just be in and out of the lineup. But I think the biggest hits for us, and I remember talking at the start of the season saying like our forward depth is some of the best in the league. You had Shane Pinto on your third line. You had Ridley Greig being able to either play on the third line or the second line. Like David Perron could go anywhere. And like none of these guys are showing up. And like, do I think that's their potential? No, absolutely not. Like these players are good players. They're not showing up. And I really they're not showing up on the score sheet. Shane Pinto is still providing a lot of value defensively. And Ridley Greig chips in now and then, but I would really like to see more from those guys. What like the top six, Claude Giroux, Father Time is definitely catching up, but he's still contributing. And I should have maybe shouted him out or given him an honorary mention. Josh Norris has been really solid this season, especially defensively. Like he takes a lot of faceoffs at high danger opportunities. He's the one that's in the defensive zone taking those types of faceoffs. He's on the PK. And yeah, maybe he's not going to score 40 goals this season. Well, who knows? Knock on wood. But he's still showing a lot of value as a second line center.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Bennett, any disagreements there, or do you have a similar kind of assortment of players when it comes to your disappointment this season?
Far? I mean, I think it's safe to say that everyone currently playing on the third and fourth line, which allows us to excuse the likes of Adam Gaudette, who have been deservedly moved up. Everyone currently playing on the third and fourth line has been complete ass this year. Just absolute nothing. Just complete black hole offensively. Here's a stat for you that's fun.
I love good stats.
So Adam Gaudette is on a 775K AAV, and he has 12 goals. The 10 players below him in the lineup also have 12 goals in total, and they make $14 million of our cap.
Love
Uh,
it.
and they have managed to uh, make up the same number of goals as like a guy who played in the AHL the last 2 seasons. Uh, which is a knock against Gaudette. I mean, hey, like players play, there's lots of skill in the AHL. He got moved up for a reason. He's showing that he can hack it at this level. Good for him. But there's a lot of career NHL guys in that second group who are making a lot more money than Gaudette is and are doing a whole lot of nothing right now. And if I were Steve Staios, I would be really upset about that because you spent a lot of money in cap room and, signing these guys in the offseason, and they maybe haven't made the team like worse, but they certainly haven't made the team better. And you mentioned Josh Norris and his play. He's showing a little bit of, fight and consistency this year. He's got 9 goals and 6 assists, 15 points in 24 games. It's okay. I mean, like he's not playing up to the level of his contract. I don't know that he ever will, which I think is always going to cause there to be question marks about whether his continued presence on the team is worthwhile, just in terms of like opportunity cost of like what could you buy with that $8 million, and how would that have a stronger effect on your team than like 2/3 of like Josh Norris, right? Because like if like you imagine like 100% Josh Norris to be the guy that almost scored 40 goals, I don't think we're going to see that guy ever again. I think Dorion got baited, and we know that Dorion was a weak and ineffective GM who was prone to, you know, overcorrection and overreaction to short-term circumstances. I don't think anyone should be surprised or clutching pearls at the prospects that he, bit too quickly on a guy who just had a really like horseshoe up his ass kind of year. And I think that giving him that contract created a lot of expectations that I don't think are going to help him for the rest of his career. Not saying he's necessarily going to be, the next Skinner in that deal, because I mean there were times where Jeff Skinner was like legit just like scoring 0 goals for like games and games at a time. Norris isn't that bad, but I think like it's right to ask questions about whether you should be paying a guy $8 million to be your 2C, and he has like 6 assists. That's not great. He's not really much of a playmaker, and when he's not scoring, like he's like responsible defensively, that's great. But again, it's like, is that worth the percentage of the cap that he's taking up, right? Anyway, so I mean, it's like, like, hey, like he's healthy, he's like contributing sometimes. It's hard to be too hard on the guy, but I do think that like thinking that like Josh Norris is playing fine now and that's good is kind of like the kind of thinking that Sens fans need to like train themselves out of if we want to see this team actually take a step up and be like a competitive team. It's like you have to accept like guys making $8 million should not have a stat line that looks like that.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I think it's also just due to the fact like he missed a lot of time. So it actually looks like a step in the right direction. But you're right. Like, will he meet the expectations of his contract this season and in the future? I don't know. Like, I'm not like usually I'm pretty optimistic, but on that one, not 100. But to me, I would say like more significant money, where you're not getting the value that you should be, is coming out of your bottom six. Like you look at Shane Pinto, he got a big payday after having an excellent half season last year. He has like what, a few points this season, I think. Yeah, 3 points in 16 games.
And
Um,
0 in the last 10.
yeah, you have Ridley Greig, who's also struggling in the games he's played. They brought in, and I know Greig's not making a ton of money, but he's gonna be an RFA and seeking a new contract. You have guys like Michael Amadio, who has 5 points in 24 games, and he's a guy who won a cup with Vegas. They signed him for about like what, 2.6 million this offseason for 3 years. He's been decent defensively, but like, you're hoping for more chipping in on the score sheet from a guy like that. You look at David Perron. I know there's been some like family stuff in there that's, taken him away from the team a couple times this season. But, he's a guy who, when he does come back, you're going to want him to start getting some points because he's being paid $4.5 million for the next 2 years. So those are just like a few guys where you expect them to be bigger contributors than they have been this season. And you don't expect Adam Gaudette, I definitely didn't, to have 12 goals, which has matched his career high in a season. Like, I did not expect him to do that this season. And we're at the quarter way mark. So could he end up with like 25 to 30 goals? Yes. I hope it doesn't result in a Zach Smith-esque contract. But it's nice to see, but it's also disappointing that of our bottom six, he is the guy who has like been the most valuable. If you told me that when you've signed David Perron, Michael Amadio, Noah Gregor, Nick Cousins, you've got Greig and Pinto in your bottom six, and your best guy's been Adam Gaudette, I'd be like, oh God, what has gone wrong?
Yeah.
So really happy for him. And I think it's a great story. A lot of people I know in the market have been talking about that. But to me, it's like you absolutely need to get a guy or get some of your guys in your bottom six going, especially the guys who are making the money that says, hey, you've done this in the league multiple times, you've won cups or a cup, like, let's go. So that's kind of my thought process on that.
Yeah, it's kind of mystifying. Like, I really didn't expect our our forwards to go this way. I mean, as I stated previous, I thought they were really in a good position, and then this happens. I feel like they're snake bit. Um, but somebody made a really good point. Like, what were we really expecting from Amadio? Like, he has a career high, like 27 points or something like that. Um, and then David Perron obviously has a like such a shitty family situation to have happen. Like, I don't think there's any job that you could succeed at with that type of situation happening. Um, so I really feel for him, and I hate to kind of criticize, because like, at what point do you even like want to be playing a sport when you have a situation like that going on?
Yeah, and that's
Um,
totally valid. It's just when he does come back and hopefully all the dust is settled and his family's doing well, I would like to see him, get on the board and start being
yeah,
consistent there. Because
yeah.
yes, the start this season has been really tough. It seems like on his family, also in a new city. I don't know the last time he's played in Canada or if he's ever played in a Canadian market. From what I recall, he hasn't, but I can't
I feel
remember.
like he played in Edmonton.
Yeah, I think he played on
Okay.
Edmonton.
But yeah, I guess aside from that, like I mostly remember him like on the Blues, Vegas, Detroit. So having to move to Canada, there are a lot of like personal life things you need to take care of aside from then the health concerns of your infant child. So I can appreciate all that and don't want to harp on the guy. But at the same time, like when he does come back, that's what he needs
Yeah,
to
we
do. He
need
needs to get
him
on
to be
the
going.
scoreboard.
Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
ultimately it. And it sucks. Like, I mean, Ridley Gregg, you were expecting him to be really, really good, and he's not. And maybe we just as a fan base overrated him, and that's fine. But that means like Staios had some misses already, and that's tough.
Mhm.
So, um, and that's just the forwards.
Yeah, well, I did want to give one more shout out to a guy who hasn't played a lot this season, but I've liked what I've seen from him, and that'd be Cole Reinhardt. Got his first NHL goal against his hometown Calgary Flames. That was really cool for him. But also, just when he's come up, it could just be him trying to take advantage of the moment, and who knows if he'd be like that for a full 82 games. But I've really liked the energy he brings to the bottom six. And I think I mean, I say young guy, he's, already 24. But when a guy who I guess hasn't had like a big chance at cracking the NHL, when a guy like that can get into the NHL and contribute on both sides of the puck, I think it's a nice story for him, and I really hope that he can, continue to get call ups and bring some energy to the lineup. So I just want to give a little shout out to him before we move on to our next segment.